The case of missing pilot and smuggler Wallace Thrasher has baffled investigators and true crime enthusiasts for decades because the case is straight up a Hollywood movie plot. And just to be clear right off the bat, this isn't your typical missing persons case. It involves no less than 3 plane crashes. Thrasher was indicted for various trafficking offenses in the mid-1980s, then disappeared under circumstances that remain hotly debated. Despite numerous rumors, including that he died in a plane crash or faked his own death, conclusive evidence of his fate has never been found. Wallace Leon Thrasher was born on April 21, 1946. Little is publicly documented about his youth, but by the late 1970s he was living in southwestern Virginia. Thrasher had a wife and child, and associates described him as charismatic and helpful, if sometimes private. At some point in his adult life, Thrasher took up flying airplanes. Those who knew him said he was a confident pilot who seemed to enjoy the independence and thrill that came with aviation. In the early 1980s, allegations surfaced that Thrasher was using his aviation skills for illegal ends. Rumors swirled in local communities of substance-filled planes landing on clandestine airstrips late at night. While some heard whispers about Thrasher's alleged activities, it was not until the mid-1980s that federal and state officials started to build a formal case against him. Authorities began investigating Thrasher after multiple reports indicated he was involved in smuggling large quantities of weed and coke from South America into the U.S. According to investigators, Thrasher would fly his plane to sites in the Caribbean or Central America, load it with dope, then transport the contraband back into the rural American South. Law enforcement agencies across the country began sharing intelligence on Thrasher. They believed he might have been part of a larger trafficking network, a network that employed local airstrips, remote back roads, and clandestine properties to hide substantial shipments. It was thought that his substances would be transported to major distribution hubs such as Chicago for further processing. This all sounds pretty standard so far, but this is where things are going to go off the rails and get real weird real quick. On October 17, 1984, a plane flown by one of Thrasher's pilots crashed in Virginia, and 1,200 pounds of weed was discovered. Authorities were able to prove that Thrasher was the owner of the plane, but just as they went to make the arrest, a shocking twist occurred. A newspaper reported that Wallace Thrasher had died in a plane crash in Jamaica. The authorities went to Jamaica and obtained the death certificate, which they determined to be false. They further found no evidence whatsoever of any crash occurring in Jamaica on the date in question. Thrasher's wife later revealed that after October 17, 1984, her husband loaded up $250,000 into a plane for a trip to Belize. She had believed it was one of his standard refill runs to Latin America. Despite authorities issuing an arrest warrant and conducting a significant investigation, no leads came up on Thrasher. In 1986, Thrasher allegedly died in yet another plane crash, this time in Belize. And to prove that Wallace Thrasher really definitely was 100% not living for real this time, a friend of his showed up with his wedding ring recovered from the crash site. Unlike the plane crash in Jamaica, this was actually a real one, and the authorities checked it out, only to discover the extreme severity of the crash. The flames had been so intense that the entire structure of the plane had melted into the ground, calling into question how a pristine wedding ring could have been pulled from the crash site. So I know the theory that the person is still alive can be brought up in relation to every missing person case ever. But I'm just going to come out and say that this one hits different, and in a big way. The questionable plane crash reports, contradictory death certificates, and suspiciously intact wedding ring suggest he orchestrated elaborate deceptions to evade prosecution. And it's important to remember that the authorities had him dead to rights on 1,200 pounds of weed. He was cooked to the point of being well done. Perhaps Thrasher leveraged connections in the smuggling underworld to fabricate a connection to the Belize crash, counting on remote foreign locations and corruption to conceal his tracks. After all, a few well-placed bribes, falsified documents, and planted evidence could enable a wealthy, charismatic pilot to vanish without a trace. Instead of dying in Belize, Thrasher may have slipped into a life under a new identity. With his fortune from smuggling operations, he could have settled somewhere very far from prying eyes that could perhaps only be reached by a landing strip. The dramatic recovery of Thrasher's wedding ring from a fiery crash site reads more like stage theater than hard proof. I think another option needs to be considered as well, though. Wallace Thrasher had accumulated a significant amount of wealth, and there was a ton of heat on him from American authorities. It's always possible that one of his associates had him eliminated, bringing the heat down on their criminal operation, while also allowing the associate to confiscate his illicit earnings. Wicca is a modern pagan, earth-centered religion, and is often considered part of the broader category of neo-paganism. It was founded in England during the early to mid-20th century by Gerald Gardner, who claimed he was initiated into a secret witch coven called the New Forest Coven in 1939. Gardner publicly introduced Wicca in the 1950s, blending elements of pre-Christian beliefs, ceremonial magic, and Western esotericism. He popularized it through books like Witchcraft Today in 1954 and The Meaning of Witchcraft in 1959. The religion quickly spread and evolved, especially after it was brought to the United States in the 1960s. Wicca is sometimes referred to as the craft, partly in an effort to dissociate it from Christian ideas of what witchcraft traditionally involved. Its foundation is heavily based on the writings of Margaret Murray, who proposed the witch cult hypothesis, claiming that a pre-Christian, pan-European pagan religion survived underground. Murray's ideas were largely discredited, but they heavily influenced the portrayal of Wicca as a continuation of ancient traditions. Gardner's writings leaned on this hypothesis, as well as borrowing material from earlier occultists like Aleister Crowley and Charles Leland. Gardner even created the Book of Shadows, a central text for Wiccan rituals, which he initially claimed was ancient, but was later revealed to be largely compiled from various modern sources. Doreen Valiente, an influential figure in the development of Wicca, joined Gardner's coven in the 1950s. Valiente revised much of Gardner's Book of Shadows to remove elements directly borrowed from Crowley and to craft rituals that felt more authentic and meaningful to practitioners. She also helped write foundational texts and incorporated the Wiccan Rede into the religion, a key moral statement that emphasizes practitioners can do what you will so long as you harm none. Wicca's structure is decentralized, which means there are various branches or traditions with different beliefs and practices. Gardnerian Wicca, the original tradition founded by Gardner, emphasizes initiation and hierarchical coven structure. Alexandrian Wicca, another significant branch, was founded by Alex Sanders in the 1960s and incorporates similar beliefs but with a more flexible approach. There are also non-traditional eclectic forms of Wicca that draw from diverse spiritual sources and often don't require initiation through a coven. Eclectic Wiccans may practice alone as solitary practitioners or in loosely organized groups. Wiccan theology is generally duotheistic, worshipping a goddess and a god, often conceptualized as the triple goddess, associated with the moon, and the horned god, linked to nature and the sun. These deities are frequently seen as archetypal figures representing feminine and masculine energies, and many Wiccans view them as aspects of a greater, unified divinity. In practice, Wiccans may worship these deities under different names from various mythologies. Some traditions are strictly polytheistic, while others take a more monotheistic or pantheistic approach. Notably, some Wiccans are atheists and agnostics, believing that the divinities worshipped are archetypical figures. Rituals are central to Wiccan practice and often take place within a circle, a sacred space created to focus energy and provide a boundary between the physical and spiritual realms. Common rituals include esbats, which are ceremonies held on full moons dedicated to the goddess, and sabbats, seasonal festivals marking the wheel of the year. These festivals are deeply tied to the cycles of nature, reflecting Wicca's emphasis on the interconnectedness of life and the earth. Magic is also an integral part of Wicca, often seen as a natural force that can be manipulated through the use of rituals, symbols, and intentions. The practice of magic in Wicca isn't focused on coercion, but rather on harmony and balance. The rule of three is an ethical guideline suggesting that whatever energy a person sends out, positive or negative, will return to them threefold. This belief emphasizes the harmony of all things and the belief that acting in a harmful nature is swiftly punished. This principle, along with the Wiccan Rede, forms the basis of Wiccan ethical practice, emphasizing personal responsibility and non-harm. Okay, so now I need to circle back to the origins of Wicca so we can actually get into the mystery here. Gardner, considered the father of modern Wicca, as discussed at the beginning of this section, claimed that Wicca was an ancient pagan religion, secretly passed down through the generations. According to Gardner, he was initiated into one of these surviving covens in 1939 by a woman named Dorothy Clutterbuck in the New Forest area of England. And yes, for those wondering, Dorothy Clutterbuck was very much a real person. Notably, at least publicly, she presented herself as a practicing Christian, which some have suggested indicates that she was definitely not a witch. Respectfully, I disagree with this view, given that the witch cult hypothesis postulates that existing covens survived by having their members pretend to be devout Christians. Further, there's analogous situations throughout history, such as crypto-Jews in Spain and crypto-Christians in Japan during various periods. Of course, none of this is to say that Dorothy Clutterbuck was actually a witch, but the fact that she was outwardly Christian doesn't automatically invalidate all claims by Gardner. While Gardner's version of Wicca drew inspiration from earlier traditions, evidence for the unbroken lineage he claimed remains tenuous at this time. However, of course, I must emphasize that he claimed to have gone public with an esoteric tradition. As such, I wouldn't expect substantial historical records of any such tradition to be preserved, or to be preserved in a way which would be unambiguous to an outsider. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to share this video with your friends and family. Click the share button and send my video to 2 people who you think might enjoy it. I'll be forever grateful that you did. Also, quick, very special shout out to Bella the cat. Rest well, you've earned it. This case is a special request from subscriber Derek Ronk, who wants to bring attention to the case of his slain cousin, Elizabeth Chapman. And just a quick warning before we get into this case. There's very little out there on her, and the sources I'm relying on are less reliable than I would usually consult. Elizabeth, a 32-year-old woman from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, was found deceased in Washington County, Utah, in August 2017. Her remains were discovered near the Virgin River by a family out for a hike in the remote region. Her body was in an advanced state of decomposition, which initially made identification challenging. However, through collaborative efforts between the Washington County Sheriff's Office and the Utah Office of the Medical Examiner, her identity was confirmed. Investigators sought assistance from the public, requesting information from anyone who had seen or interacted with Chapman between the second week of July and the end of August 2017. Despite these efforts, details surrounding her activities during this period remained extremely scarce. It's been noted that Elizabeth had been in Las Vegas, Nevada prior to her death, and it was believed she might have been using Craigslist to arrange rides according to an unverified source. Her last known location was reported to be the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, again according to an unverified source I found online. And normally, of course, I wouldn't be presenting a source like an unverified post on a message board, but given the limited evidence in Elizabeth's case, something is better than nothing. The circumstances of Chapman's death led to various speculations, including the possibility of foul play. However, as of the latest available information, no conclusive evidence has been publicly disclosed to confirm the exact cause or manner of her death. The case remains open, with authorities continuing to seek information that could shed light on the events leading up to her untimely demise. If you have any information whatsoever in relation to Elizabeth Chapman's case, please contact the Washington County Sheriff's Office in Utah with details. Demonic possession is a topic found within many occult traditions and refers to the belief that an external spirit or entity, often malevolent, takes control of an individual's body and mind. Throughout history, numerous cultures have recognized phenomena akin to demonic possession. In ancient Mesopotamia, for instance, ailments and psychological disturbances were frequently attributed to malevolent spirits. Similarly, in ancient Greece, the concept of daimones encompassed both benevolent and malevolent entities believed to influence human behavior. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church's interpretation of possession was predominantly demonic, leading to numerous exorcisms as well as witch hunts. Religious and occult traditions worldwide show remarkable similarities in signs and symptoms of demonic possession. One of the most commonly reported signs is unusual physical strength. Individuals believed to be possessed are said to exhibit strength that far exceeds their natural capacity. Cases from historical and contemporary accounts describe people, often of modest build, performing feats that would typically require far greater physical power. This phenomenon is especially unsettling for witnesses and is frequently interpreted as evidence of an external entity taking control of the body. Those who report witnessing such strength describe the event as something that defies normal human limitations, suggesting an unnatural influence at work. Another prominent sign of possession is an aversion to sacred objects, particularly religious symbols like crosses, holy water, or scripture. In numerous reports, possessed individuals display strong, even violent reactions to these objects. This aversion is often accompanied by expressions of fear, aggression, or disgust, leading many to conclude that a malevolent entity inhabits the individual and recoils from items representing goodness. Possession cases sometimes feature instances where the affected individual speaks languages unknown to them. Often termed xenoglossy, this phenomenon involves a person suddenly articulating phrases or entire conversations in a foreign language they've never studied or encountered before. This is particularly disturbing to observers, as it seems to reveal knowledge that the person could not have acquired through natural means. In the Christian context, reports of xenoglossy during possession generally include use of ancient languages, like Latin, Ancient Greek, or Aramaic. Personality shifts are also observed, where an ordinarily gentle individual may exhibit aggressive, hostile, or blasphemous behavior. This change can seem so drastic that it appears as if another consciousness has taken over, with the original personality entirely suppressed. However, these signs aren't universally accepted as evidence of possession. Many skeptics and mental health professionals argue that these symptoms can stem from psychological or neurological disorders rather than an external spirit or entity. Conditions such as dissociative identity disorder, psychosis, or epilepsy can produce behaviors that mimic possession symptoms, including personality shifts and language disturbances. Psychological explanations suggest that individuals displaying signs of possession may be experiencing an intense mental health crisis rather than a supernatural event. Exorcism, the act of expelling a possessing entity, varies across cultures. In Christian traditions, it generally involves invoking the name of Jesus Christ to command the demon to depart, and citing passages where Jesus combated demonic entities spiritually. Jesse Galganoff, a 22-year-old from Montreal, Canada, embarked on an 8-month backpacking journey through South America and Southeast Asia in September 2017. Having recently graduated from Wesleyan University in Connecticut, he planned to begin medical school upon his return from his adventure. On September 24, 2017, Jesse departed Montreal for Lima, Peru, where he began the South American leg of the journey. After spending a few days in Lima, he traveled to Huaraz, a city known for its proximity to the Cordillera Blanca mountain range. On September 28th, he informed his mother, Elisa Klaman, that he intended to hike the Santa Cruz Trail. This is a popular 50-kilometer trek, and he informed her that he would be out of communication for approximately 4 days, or maybe slightly longer, depending on conditions. He assured her he would reach out by the end of the day on October 2nd, 2017. When that date passed without any contact, concern started to grow among his family and friends. The initial search efforts faced numerous challenges. Peruvian authorities conducted investigations, but progress was limited. In November 2017, Elisa enlisted the help of Magnus International, a search and rescue company specializing in operations in remote areas. The team utilized drones, conducted interviews, and coordinated with local authorities to trace Jesse's steps. Despite their extensive efforts, no physical evidence whatsoever was found of Jesse. During the investigation, 2 French hikers reported camping with Jesse on September 30th. They noted he appeared disoriented, possibly due to altitude sickness, but seemed better the next day when they parted ways. This information provided a crucial key element in the timeline, but didn't yield any further leads. As months passed without new information, the theory of foul play gained traction. The lack of any trace, no belongings or remains, suggested to investigators that someone might have intentionally concealed evidence. This perspective intensified the search, but concrete answers remained elusive. The emotional and financial toll on Jesse's family was immense. Elisa made multiple trips to Peru, retracing her son's steps on the Santa Cruz Trail to understand his journey and seek closure. The search efforts, including hiring specialized teams and conducting extensive ground and aerial searches, amounted to over $1 million. According to some reports, the family completely exhausted themselves financially, doing absolutely everything they could to find Jesse. Unfortunately, despite these extremely extensive efforts, they're no closer to finding a resolution to his mysterious disappearance.